Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Nerdy. Today is Monday, March 25th, 2024, and I'm the host of the show, Cara Santa Maria. And as always, before we dive into this week's episode, I do want to thank those of you who make Talk Nerdy possible. Remember, Talk Nerdy is and will always be 100% free to download, and that's because I rely on the support of listeners just like you. This week's top patrons for the show, that's those who pledge the top dollar amounts to keep the show going, include Daniel Lang, David J.E. Smith, Mary Neva, Brian Holden, David Compton, Gabrielle F. Jaramillo, Joe Wilkinson, Pasquale Gelati, Riva Keith, and Ulrika Hagman. If you would like to pledge your support on an episodic basis, all you have to do is visit patreon.com/talknerdy, where you can learn more about how to do so. All right, let's dive into this week's episode. So, I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Daniela Rus. She is a roboticist and professor of electrical engineering and computer science at MIT. She is the director of computer science and artificial intelligence laboratory there. And she's also a member of the National Academy of Engineering, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and she's a MacArthur Genius Fellow. She co-wrote with Gregory Mohn a brand new book called The Heart and the Chip, Our Bright Future with Robots. So without any further ado, here she is, Dr. Daniela Rus. Well, Daniela, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Cara. I'm so excited to spend this time with you.
Yeah, so you've got a brand new book called The Heart and the Chip, Our Bright Future with Robots. And you, of course, are a roboticist and an electrical engineer and a computer science, et cetera, et cetera. Talk to me a little bit before we get into the book and sort of our relationship with robots and robotics. Talk to me a little bit about your past and your journey. How does one become a roboticist, a computer scientist, an engineer, all three together?
Well, Cara, I grew up in Romania at a time of great austerity. And in my spare time, I read a lot of books. And I reflected and I fantasized about superpowers and faraway places. But I never imagined back then that I would be one day working at MIT, building robots and thinking about a bright future with machines. My family emigrated to the United States around the time I was finishing high school. And I was an undergraduate at the University of Iowa, where I focused on computer science, mathematics, and astronomy. And I often took trips to Chicago, where I enjoyed the lake, the Chagall stained glass at the Museum of Art, the music life, the food. It was really exciting. Now, toward the end of my studies, I had an encounter that changed the course of my professional life. One of the great minds in computer science, computer scientist John Hopcroft, visited the university and gave a distinguished talk. Now, his talk was extraordinary. In his talk, he basically explained that computer science was solved and it was time for the grand applications. You can imagine, as an undergraduate student studying computer science, I found that a little bit unsettling.
Right.
But when I had a chance to speak with him afterwards, what he said was that a lot of the problems that the founders of the field posed initially were solved. They had solutions. But that was a time of great opportunity. And the great opportunity was to build computing that interacted with the physical world and with people. We take that for granted now, but in the late 1980s, when this conversation took place, computation was primarily for the digital world. So I was very inspired, and I was excited to join John at Cornell University to work on one of these grand applications, which was robotics. And it was an extraordinary time because we had we had the aspiration to solve these big problems, but we actually didn't have the machines that could translate our ideas into solutions, into fact. And so simply developing computational techniques didn't work because the robots we had back then were very big and bulky and had a very limited repertoire of doing things. And so that's when I sort of realized that in order for us to make real progress in the field of robotics, we have to think about two aspects of the field. We have to think about the body of the machine and the brain of the machine, because the machine will only be able to do what the body is capable of doing. But then the machine also needs a brain, because without the brain, without the controllers and the algorithms, without the AI brain, the machine will be an inert mechanism. And so, in order for robotics to achieve its potential, we really needed to think about the body of the machine and the brain of the machine. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
I love that. I think about I'm a child of the 80s. So I just turned 40 this past year. I was born in 1983. And when I think about my childhood here in the United States, I am sort of I'm an elder millennial, you could say. I'm one of the sort of last of the generation where my toys growing up were definitely not all mechanical. There were a lot of sort of electric toys, things that were battery powered, but I did not really have computer chips in my toys. And I grew up in a world where there was this distinction between the mechanical or the electrified and the computational or like the iPhone in your pocket or the laptop sitting in front of you. I always saw like a big distinction between those two. But children growing up now probably don't even have that view or that understanding because computational power is in so many things. And I use toys as an example because you can very much see the evolution of toys through these different eras and see that they're um quite a kind of time capsule of the technologies that we were working with in a commercial way. And so I'm super curious, from your perspective, is do you think that that is a good way to look at these changes? Or are children's toys even a good sort of metric for that?
It's a very interesting point of view, Kara. So, as I think about it, let me observe that when I was a kid, I was amazed by the Polaroid, by how the chemicals magically brought colors in photos to life right before your eyes. And now my daughters live in the world where they have, in some sense, the equivalent of a digital Polaroid in the form of a smartphone. And they touch the smartphone and they get images on screens to respond to the swipe. It's a very different world. What I want to do is I want that image to come out of the phone and grow into a physical structure, physical thing that can interact with us and help us and really transform how we view the world.
Yeah, sort of it's almost like this bimodal or I don't know how to put it into words, but we went from the chemical, the mechanical into this booming era of the computational. And now we're in this world where there's a deep synthesis between the two, where the computational is no longer in the ether. It's no longer just on the internet. It's no longer just behind the screen, but it's becoming an everyday part of our experience. It's becoming integrated into places we didn't ever kind of imagine it would be.
Computation is indeed everywhere. It's in so many devices and objects we interact with. But there is a really interesting phenomenon that is happening right under our eyes today, and this is the AI phenomenon. So AI is growing in capabilities right under our eyes. We are watching these capabilities expand. And we know a lot about AI today, but you see, most of the extraordinary AI solutions we have today that exhibit so much intelligence, so much computational power, are still in the digital world. We also have a physical world where we have robots on the manufacturing floor. And these robots are masterpieces of engineering that can do so much more than people can. And yet, the robots on the manufacturing floor are not that intelligent. In fact, they have to operate in a rigid environment. They perform fixed operations, and they have to be isolated from people because they are big and bulky and dangerous to be around. What I would like to see is a merging of the two worlds, a merging of the extraordinarily intelligent digital AI world with a potentially magical world of physical machines. And I want all of this to be intelligent. I want to create physical intelligence. And this is actually coming to life today. And some of the capabilities we have are highlighted in the book.
Well, maybe you can help us sort of go back to a more foundational conversation, because I think we want to make sure we're always working from the same operational definitions. And I think sometimes when we have conversations, we take things for granted and we use words without fully understanding what they mean. So when we talk about a robot, what are we actually talking about? Is it just a machine? How do we define what a robot is, as opposed to, you know, is my vacuum a robot, or is my vacuum a machine, or are they one and the same?
If it's a Roomba, it's a robot. If it's a manual vacuum cleaner, it's not a robot. Basically, you can think of robotics as putting computation in motion. And you can think of a robot as a programmable mechanical device that can exert forces by taking input from the world, reasoning about that input through computation, and then deciding what to do next.
Okay, so when I think about going back to sort of the children's toy example, when I grew up, I had a toy that I loved called Teddy Ruxpin. So this was a teddy bear that had a tape player in its belly, and its mouth would move along with the music or with the stories it was telling. This was a purely mechanical device. But kids today might have a similar toy that reacts to their voice, or that, can take inputs from the real world and make decisions about what to do next. So that's more of a robot. Like, there are robots as children's toys, yes?
There are some robots as children's toys. You have to think about how much autonomy and how much computation is processed by that toy. And so your toy from your childhood was a sophisticated automaton because it did the same thing no matter what. But a robot would have to adapt to the situation that it finds itself in. Like, imagine walking into the dentist office, and imagine being greeted by a little humanoid toy that recognizes you walked through the door, greets you, and then asks you, "Have you flossed your teeth recently?" That would be a kind of a robotic toy, because that instance, that device is able to identify when you come in, it's able to come to you, it's able to engage in an interaction with you, and it's able to adapt this interaction to you or to me or anybody else walking in the space.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as a sort of lay consumer to think about, where is that dividing line? Like, where is that threshold? You know, a lot of us are used to the science fiction versions or the Boston Dynamics versions of these humanoid or these dog-like or bear-like robots. We can instantly identify that that's a robot. Or, you know, like you mentioned, the Roomba. We kind of all know that's a robot vacuum. Or these large manufacturing robots that are working on the line in, let's say, a car manufacturer. But where is that sort of minimum threshold for something to go from being mechanical or purely computational into the kind of definition of a robot?
Well, the elements that we need are perception, the sensors of the robot, the brain, the computation that the robot executes based on perception values, and then the actuators that have the ability to do something in the world. So these are the three important components that define a robot. But I want to make a comment about what you said with respect to humanoids and robot arms. And I want to observe that most of the robots that we have today are inspired by the human form. We have these manipulators that look like arms, we have humanoids. We also have robots that look like boxes on wheels, like cars. And so I think this is a very limited view of what a robot could be in our future. Our built environment and our natural environment come in so many more shapes. We have fish shapes, we have turtle shapes, we have cheetah shapes, we have chair shapes, we have table shapes. Imagine if we had the ability to take any kind of shape in the physical world, in the built environment, or in the natural environment, and create a machine inspired by that shape, a machine that could be optimized to help you do certain tasks, to help you maybe sit straight when you have to pay attention, or help you relax when you can take it easier. So, this is part of what I want to do with my work. And this is an idea I try to convey in the book, that while we are really constrained in what we typically associate with a robotic device, I think it's important to expand our horizons and think about all kinds of things in our world that could be robots, that could do things for us. And and also we should think about all the materials that we use in order to build these machines. Traditional robots are built out of metals and heavy plastics, and this leads to quite rigid and dangerous mechanisms to be around. But in the natural world, we have so many more materials. So why not consider making machines out of anything? And in our lab, we have made robots out of paper and plastic and silicone. We even made a robot out of food. And so it's really almost liberating to think about all these different kinds of tools that we can bring into our lives in order to support us with physical work.
Yeah, sort of this evolution that we've been seeing unfold between, like you mentioned, these rigid hard parts and these more like soft robots using these really innovative materials from different material scientists, and also this idea of biomimicry of sort of looking at the natural world and seeing how things move and change and borrowing from that. It reminds me of the when you look at sort of the history of technology, you often see that we are constrained by our own imaginations. And I think about the earliest cars, right? Like I think about like the Model T and some of the very early experimentation with cars, or you watch a television show like Peaky Blinders and you're seeing them driving these coaches, and they just look like horse carriages because that's what we always used before. They basically took the horse away and put it in the engine, but the shape and the functionality of these early cars was based on what we knew before. And I think technology often evolves that way. We're so constrained by, well, that's how it works, right? It's the only way we can make it work. Instead of thinking, well, no, now we're using a radically new approach. We don't have to be constrained by the way it's always looked and acted to us.
Well, exactly, exactly. We don't have to be constrained. We can be very imaginative, and we can imagine turning anything into a robot. We can turn our furniture into robots. We can make robots that swim like fish. We can make robots that swim like turtles. We can make robots that run like cheetahs. And there are many extraordinary uses of these specialized machines. I mean, in some sense, the idea of building a machine in our own image that is smart and obedient really goes back to antiquity. We have built so many technological marvels throughout history. But what makes these machines special today is the fact that they have these brains that allow these machines to understand the world, to respond to it, to understand the people around them, and adapt to what they need doing. And the idea of making a robot as a humanoid has um, an additional aspect to it, namely that a robot that's built in our own image can be seen as a kind of a universal machine that would be able to do a lot of different types of tasks. Well, unfortunately, our hardware is not quite good enough to deliver these universal robots yet. And our software is not quite good enough to have these machines execute tasks with a grace and agility that we are used to, that we see in the natural world. The robots, the humanoid robots, look a little bit mechanistic in how they move in the world. We would like to have machines that are much more agile, much more graceful in how they interact with the world and with people. And so, if you have seen the Boston Dynamics machines, those machines tend to be very agile, but those machines are pre programmed to do the tasks that they do. They don't have quite, I mean, they look amazing. They do such extraordinary behaviors and tasks. I love how they dance to Rolling Stones music, my favorite. But still, those it took a lot of engineers to fine tune all the parameters and get those robots to do what they're doing. If you take a robot that has been pre-programmed like that and you put this robot in a different environment and ask this robot to do a different task, and the robot will have trouble, or the engineers would have to come in and start all over with tasking and programming the robot. And so, an alternative to this idea of a universal robot is to think about designing machines that are specialized and optimized for a smaller set of tasks. Then you get a smart device that is able to do really well a smaller set of tasks, not all the tasks. And so that's an alternative view for why these machines might be helpful to us. Because while we don't quite have this universal humanoid, Rosie, we actually can have a lot of other specialized machines that already do so much work for us. We have robots that help with packing in factories side by side with people. We have robots that monitor facilities. We have robots that assist doctors in hospitals. We have robots that are exploring Mars or exploring the depths of the ocean. We have even robots that milk our cows. These are all specialized machines that will do so much more for us in the future.
Yeah, and I think that you make such an important point that I've often grappled with is this idea that somehow a superior robot is one that's made in our image, or that somehow, because quote unquote we are at the top of the food chain, or it's such an anthropocentric view that the best or the most attuned or the most effective robots would be those that look like us, because it assumes that we are the most effective and we are the best at certain tasks. But there's a hubris in that ignores exactly the point that you made, that maybe the human form is not the most adapted to milking a cow. And maybe, there can be a much more efficient and effective and even cow friendly robot that milks the cow that feels safer and more comfortable and more welcoming than human hands, for example.
Exactly. And these specialized robots, these robots designed with specific tasks in mind, can do so much for us. They can take on physical tasks, and through that, they can save us invaluable time. But they can also enhance our ability to perform work and to get entertained with unparalleled accuracy. For instance, robots can magnify our vision. They can allow us to see with clarity beyond the natural capacity of the human eye. Robots can also help us extend our reach, like a drone that would go and investigate or inspect a faraway bridge, or the robots on Mars that are advancing science. They can amplify our strengths, like the wearable exoskeletons that are beginning to get deployed in construction and for physical rehabilitation. They can refine our precision. And so you see, robots, you can imagine robots taking on so many shapes. The clothes you wear could be robots. Um, the the drones are indeed robots, but you can imagine them as kind of mobile eyes that we throw in the distance to give us extra length in how we can perceive the world. We have all these different possibilities. And what I'm really excited about and inspired about is this idea that with machines, we can amplify human capabilities. We can transcend our human limitations. And we can do so by using machines to extend our reach, to give us strength and precision, to help us defy gravity like Iron Man by lifting up in the third dimension, to see really small things, um, even to achieve the kind of magical attributes that we typically associate with storybooks and fiction and movies. And so through these remarkable machines, we are not just augmenting our physical capabilities, we are also redefining the very boundaries of the human potential.
You think about if we were to survey 100 years ago citizens of our planet about the future of robots, and you might see a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. You might also see a lot of hope and a lot of excitement. I think that today we're living in this really transitional period where there is still so much yet to discover and to achieve, but there's also become a normalization of the concept of robotics, that people are sort of familiar and comfortable living among machines, and even intelligent machines, because we all have computers in our back pockets, because we have smart versions of things in our homes. I think that there's a comfort that has evolved. Yet, there's still this disquiet, this sort of discomfort around this idea of too many machines, or machines becoming too intelligent, or being able to band together. This, let's call it the Terminator fear. And I hear so much optimism in your voice and in your writing when we speak. Tell me a little bit about some of your ethical concerns, or the places where you do find caution in your optimism.
So let me share that usually when I tell people what I do, I get two types of reaction.
Hmm.
Some people get nervous and they make
Right,
jokes about Skynet, and they
right.
ask me when the robots will take over their jobs. And the other group gets wildly excited and asks me how much more they can offload to machines. Can the machine fold my laundry? When will my car be truly self driving? Now, I personally believe that everyone stands to benefit from AI, but it's important to understand the fears of that first group, the fears about robots coming to get us. And it's also important to provide solutions and perspectives on how to see things differently. And this starts with understanding that robots are tools. They are incredibly powerful tools. But like any other tool, they are not inherently good or bad. They are what we choose to do with them. And I believe we can choose to do incredible things. And this is my vision. This is my aspiration for a future with robots. Mine is a vision of a world in which bespoke machines assist people with both basic and complex tasks. And honestly, this future is beginning to mature in my lab and in the labs of my friends and colleagues at other universities and institutions around the world and at some forward thinking companies. But, um, but alongside the optimistic vision, we also have to consider scenarios where the integration of machines into society introduces complex technical, social, and ethical dilemmas and disruptions. Now, one reason I am extraordinarily optimistic is because knowing how machines work, I can tell you that there are limits to what these machines can do. And these limits are defined by the body of the machine and the brain of the machine. A robot is limited by its physical body, which consists of the shape, the sensors, the actuators, the computer's data storage power. And the robot is also limited by its brain, by the software part that consists of all the low level controllers, the algorithms, and the AI systems that guide its motion. Let me give you an example. A self driving car will not come in your home to vacuum your carpet, and a robotic vacuum cleaner will not beat you at chess. So we already have limits to what these machines can do, and these limits are controllable by people because we design them, we build them as tools. Now, of course, we introduce these machines to help us with work. One natural concern is, are we putting people out of work? Are the machines taking over the jobs? And the way I think about it is that jobs are very complex, and jobs usually consist of multiple tasks. In a typical job, we do predictable physical work, we do unpredictable physical work, we do data tasks, we apply expertise, we interact with others, with stakeholders and colleagues. And today's machines are primarily useful for predictable physical work. They're not so good at unpredictable physical work. This is why it's much easier to send a robot to Mars than to get a robot to clear your dining table after your dinner. So you see, there are limits to what machines can do, but the capabilities are gradually getting better. And as the capabilities are getting better, I believe that they can take on the kind of the low level tasks that we have on our plates, no matter what we do. And that means that we can focus more time on the more interesting, more cognitive tasks. The other aspect to jobs is that there are many jobs for which we do not have enough people to carry on those jobs. It means that now we can fulfill the tasks that otherwise would be in a queue, would be waiting a long time for these tasks. And let me give you an example. I collaborate with a very forward thinking doctor who specializes in physical therapy. And in working with a physical therapist, I have learned that, in fact, the physical therapists spend a lot of time not applying their expertise. They spend about a third of their time going to the hospital room to pick up the patient and take the patient to the gym. They spend about a third of the time working with a patient in the gym. And then they spend another third of the time taking the patient back to the hospital room. And so now imagine if we had a robotic wheelchair that the patient could use to travel autonomously to the gym. That patient could spend 3 times as much time with a doctor. And that would be very beneficial for the patient, and the doctor would have much more interesting ways of applying expertise for longer periods of time.
It's interesting because I think that one of the things that I struggle with coming from a psychology perspective is the integration of these ideas in a global sort of capitalist climate. So, you mentioned before that these are tools, right? And I think it's such an important point to make that I think many people's fears about the capabilities of robots are less, I would say they're not so much fears about the robots themselves. They're fears about the darker sides of humanity and how humanity might choose to use these tools. And so when we think about something like taking over a simple job, that sounds great in theory. I would love it if the sort of low skilled or like low paying or like the aspects of our jobs that are the most tedious were taken over by robots. But it also requires, I think, a sort of societal level change that values certain parts of the workforce in a way that I'm not sure that we do as a society and as a governing body. And I think to even piggyback off of that, when we talk about things like AI, one of the big takeaways I noticed at the beginning of this sort of Mid-Journey or Dolly revolution was that we think of AI as this incredible tool to help us, I don't know, do lit searches to write our dissertations or to help us with these sort of tasks that are frustrating. But what we end up seeing in social media or out in front of our eyes is AI making poetry and making art. And I don't want to live in a world where the robots are taking over the art and poetry. I want to live in a world where the robots are cleaning my house so I have more time to make art and poetry. But the only way that's going to work is if we value those things in a society and I can afford to live that way. And so it's almost like this is one piece of a much larger puzzle that I feel we may not be spending enough time talking about. I'm curious how you feel about that.
Yeah, you make some very, very important points. I do want to say something about jobs. I do want to add something to our discussion on jobs. I want to um, remind you that economists estimate that over 60% of jobs performed today were non-existent before 1940. And
Interesting.
so, echoing that, I see the rise of robots as promising to create all kinds of new jobs: robot operators, robot generated data analysts, user experience designers. You can imagine a lot of new jobs, some creative jobs, some technical jobs, some ethical jobs that do not exist yet. So I'm not worried that humanity is not going to figure out what to do because we're introducing these extraordinary tools. The other thing I want to say is that we're much better at thinking about what will go away than imagining what will come.
Yes, we definitely have a bias there, don't we?
For example, so let me give you a concrete example. In around the year 2000, which I remember very well, there was a computer revolution. There was a digital revolution. And we were talking about all sorts of things. But we were not talking about social media. We were not talking about smartphones. We were not talking about cloud computing. And these three, social media, cloud computing, and the smartphone, came into being in 2007. And these new technologies have enabled so many new jobs for creatives as well as for geeks. But going back to your question about AI, how do we think about AI? Because we can imagine AI powering the brains of the robots, but we can also think about all the extraordinary capabilities that the generative AI and foundational AI models have unleashed. And when I think about that, I can see multiple different trajectories for humanity. And I don't know exactly how it's going to all play out, but there are many, many different ways in which we can go. And so let me give you some examples. In today's world, when we work with AI, we essentially build large and larger machine learning models, and we put increasingly more data into these models, so that these models become very capable, so that they astound and amaze us in all kinds of digital tasks. And this is a possible way forward. But there is something really interesting about this approach. If you believe that the future is all about building these large models and putting data into these models, we have a danger. We have the possibility of creating these huge machines that we do not fully understand. These large AI models are black boxes. It is really impossible to explain how they reach their decisions. So we may get to the point where we have extraordinary machines that develop extraordinary capabilities. But the risk here is that we will not be able to explain how these machines work. And this is kind of like skilled pilots flying sophisticated aircraft by instruments alone, without understanding the principles of flight and without knowing how to navigate in the absence of their instruments. And so, to me, working with intelligent machines requires that we understand what they do. So that's one possible path forward. And this could be true. But what if we're wrong? What if we have a different kind of future where these projections will prove flawed in practice? And essentially, we will become increasingly reliant on machines that we do not understand, and we have no idea how to fix when these machines break. And frankly, this is my nightmare. I don't think about the Hollywood vision of suddenly sentient machines that decide to extinguish us, because I don't see that as a possibility. But I do worry that we will end up with a massive complex system we depend on and we can't comprehend. And then we will have enormous amounts of discarded technologies and electronic waste. That would not be a good path forward. Now, what I like to see as we move forward is intelligent machines as smarter tools for people. I would like to see a future in which robots and AI solutions are trustworthy, they're explainable, they can be certified, they are well understood, and their capabilities are well understood. And these robots and AI solutions will then assist us safely and with in a way that allows us to trust them. And they will assist us with a lot of physical tasks, a lot of cognitive tasks. They will lift humanity as a whole to a higher standard of living. And perhaps they will even give us superpowers, like the heroes from our childhood books.
You know, it's such an interesting concept, this idea of cause and effect versus correlation. This idea of the statistical understanding of sort of what comes first and amplifies something else. And I think one of the things that I continue to grapple with as I am a cautious techno optimist is that there are deep social inequities and there are supremacist forces at work and authoritarian forces at work that really are striving to keep people divided, that are striving to, let's say, keep, for example, poor people, people of color imprisoned, women in a subservient role. There are these kind of invisible, social forces at play. And I think that technology can be used as a tool to continue to divide, but it can also be used as a tool for egalitarian purposes, to unify and to, the sort of a rising tide lifts all boats. And my concern sometimes is, and maybe it's my cynicism or my pessimism, is that advances in technology, especially in AI and robotics, will deepen social divides. Whereas what I'm hearing from you is that maybe with these advances, we will see more movement towards an egalitarian future. And it's hard to know, right? Because we don't know is it the human activity that is affecting the or is it the human, I guess, interests that are affecting the technological advancements, or is the technology itself in turn having an effect on our humanity? And it's probably both. It's kind of a chicken and an egg scenario. But I'm curious about how you grapple with those questions about sort of the darker side of humanity and technology being a tool for our purposes that can be used for good or deep, deep evil.
Kara, the spread of intelligent machines will make our lives easier, but many of the roles that it can play will displace work done by humans today. So we really need to anticipate and respond to the economic inequality this could create. At the same time, we have some technical and technological issues because, especially with AI, we have a lack of interpretability. And this lack of interpretability could lead to significant issues around trust and privacy. And we need to address these issues. We need to develop an ethics and legal framework for how to use intelligent machines for the greater good. At the same time, the spread of misinformation and disinformation remains a huge concern. And social media platforms are struggling with their response. As deepfakes get better and more widespread, this problem becomes even more urgent for national security. Because as we gather more and more data to feed into intelligent AI systems, and not only is the risk to privacy higher, but so are the opportunities for authoritarian governments to leverage these tools to curtail freedom and democracy around the world. But the way I see it is that these problems aren't like the pandemic. We know they're coming, and we can set out to find solutions at the intersection of policy, technology, and business in advance. And so I can tell you that we already have solutions for the bias problem. We can look at how a machine model is trained, what kind of data the machine is trained on, and we can debias that data so that the function of the machine learning model is debiased. We can also start watermarking trusted information sources, so that when we get a piece of information, we know whether it comes from a trusted source or not. I think it's important for us to know whether we interact with machines or people when we interact. And so you see, there are already beginnings of technological solutions that can help make things better. And this is part of the reason why I'm hopeful. Now, the solutions will not be entirely in the realm of technology. We really have to think about how these solutions in the hands of people impact society. And that means we need to include policy, we need to include the business side to have comprehensive discussions for how to deploy these tools safely. What needs to be done before a tool can be safely put in the hands of people. But we are making a lot of progress every day. We are understanding more about the flaws of our systems, and we're coming up with solutions to address them. The other thing I want to say is that you were asking about whether these technologies are limited to the elite. And I want to highlight that the trajectory of robotics, much like the trajectory of the smartphones, is really poised to transition from rarity and luxury to ubiquity and accessibility. And I see that initially the robotics technology, particularly with respect to advanced autonomous robots like building a self driving car, remains expensive and somewhat limited to industrial applications and niche markets. And this is akin to the early days of smartphones, which were very costly and considered luxury items. But as robotics technology advances, the initial high cost associated with research and development and the novelty of the technology will decrease because over time, manufacturing processes will improve, the economies of scale will be achieved, and the cost of producing these machines will decrease. And so I think that this trend, coupled with competitive pressures, will make robotics technology much more affordable and accessible to the public. And I believe that this mirrors how we have experienced the smartphone trajectory, where it was the advancements in technology and mass production that reduced the costs and made smartphones accessible to a vast population on our planet.
Yeah, it's I feel like this is almost like a really good stopping point for us because it sort of encapsulates a lot of the things that we've been talking about and leaves us with a lot to think about. But I have to just ask because one question that came up, especially when you were talking about the sort of former issue of ethics and thinking about things in advance, but also the multidisciplinary aspect of technology research, right? That we need to be talking to policymakers and we need to be talking to psychologists and we need to be talking to ethicists. Like you're a professor, right? So you have students coming into your laboratory. I'm wondering how much are they interested in grappling with those questions? How much does it feel burdensome? Like, I just want to do good science. And, can't that be somebody else's job? Like, I can't do everything versus how baked in do these considerations need to be into the technology itself?
Whenever we start a new project, we organize a workshop on what can go wrong. And we gather students and researchers of different backgrounds, and we brainstorm all the different ways in which we can imagine using the technology and thinking about what could go wrong with it. And if we start from this point, we already are a few steps ahead from the point of view of making technology that can be used for the greater good rather than technology that can empower the supervillains. We can begin to also teach the students that it is important to consider the consequences of our work. And it's important to proceed cautiously and remember that ultimately we are advancing science. We are aiming to understand AI. We are aiming to understand robotics. We're aiming to understand the science and engineering of intelligence. And doing this work is teaching us right now that we have so much more to learn about these technologies and also about life itself. And I want to emphasize that we are the only species on our planet so smart, so aware, so capable of building incredible tools. But this also comes with the responsibility of ensuring that our work can be deployed for good, that we are responsible for everything on our planet, for the plants and the animals, for the neighbors we share this planet with, and also for the future generations. We are responsible and we have to proceed with our work in a way that ensures the global good. And I personally believe that this is possible, and I'm very excited about all the things we can do at this point in our history.
And of course, that is a central message to your book, and it's a central message to this conversation. I mean, just look at the title of your book, The Heart and the Chip, Our Bright Future with Robots. I have to ask Daniela before we go, and I know it's a big question, but is there anything, obviously there's probably a lot that we didn't touch on or didn't talk about, but is there anything that you feel like, is important to be said before we say goodbye? Is there anything that we didn't cover that is important for the listeners to know?
I want to emphasize that while I understand that techno optimism isn't very popular right now, I believe that with enough forethought and planning, we can achieve a future in which our humanity gets elevated. And I know that this is not going to be easy because the transition will demand very careful considerations of ethical, privacy, and employment implications to ensure that the benefits of intelligent machines are equitably distributed. Um, but I do want to highlight that the conversation around the impact of robots and AI on a grand or global scale tends to focus on doomsday scenarios. And these are obviously important and absolutely must be accounted for. We must do everything we can to steer the future in a positive direction. But we should also think about how we can use these new tools, these intelligent machines, to solve some of the largest problems we face as a species. Because these intelligent systems powered by advances in AI and robotics offer unprecedented capabilities to analyze vast data sets, to identify patterns, to execute tasks with a precision and efficiency that far surpasses human limitations. And the applications can involve combating climate change by optimizing energy consumption and reducing emissions, to revolutionizing healthcare through individualized medicine and robotic surgery, to creating sustainable solutions. There are so many different things that we can do with what we have today. One important area is using intelligent machines to advance scientific research, to automate tedious experiments, to provide hypotheses, to simulate complex theoretical models, really to accelerate the pace of discovery. And I believe that by effectively merging the heart and the chip and guiding the development of applications with wisdom, with foresight, and with a commitment to the greater good, we could solve the problems facing our people and our planet. And we could elevate humanity at the same time.
So well said. Thank you so much. Well, everybody, the book is The Heart and the Chip, Our Bright Future with Robots by Dr. Daniela Rus, along with Gregory Mohn. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
Thank you very much, Cara.
And everybody listening, thank you for coming back week after week. I'm really looking forward to the next time we all get together to talk nerdy.